And
Live.
almost there. This meeting
says
is
we're
live
live
stream.
already.
Go.
We're live. Here we are. It's St. Patrick's Day, everybody. I hope that people are drinking green beer and little leprechaun feet have walked through your kitchen and you have green toilet water and all of those fun things that happen on St. Patrick's Day. Welcome to the YC Friday morning. We're here to talk about exciting things that we've read about, things we've been talking about in our crew all week. And we're going to kick it off with one of the things that we all look forward to. Being away from our studio or being away from your job, right? Like vacation, time away. Sometimes it's not something we look forward to. Maybe it's scheduled time away that you need to be away to take care of someone else or maybe for a health reason. But we're going to talk a little bit about setting ourselves up for success here so that when we are away from the office, we can actually be away from the office. So I know you've heard us talk about it over and over, but standard operating procedures, the SOPs, do you have one in place for when you're gone? So we have our daily standard operating procedures, like here's the fuse box, here's where to, turn on the music, here's who to call if there's a flood, like those types of things. But for longer term, kind of thinking if you're gone maybe for a week and maybe you're somewhere or more, hopefully, if you're somewhere where there might be a time change, you're somewhere where there might not be great access to internet or phone calls, do you have a procedure in place for what to do in specific situations? Who to call, who handles payroll? Do they have access to all the payroll things? Do they have access to the landlord? Do they know how to contact the insurance company? It's all of those kind of things that we do that we think, oh, I'll just going to handle that. But getting those down into an SOP really will make it so that when you're away from your studio, you can actually be away from the studio. We're going to kick it around and chat on it with everybody. I want to drop in my first one. If you do coaching calls with us, the very first call you do our 2-hour alignment call where we talk about nitty gritty on things. One of the things that we talk about is how do people contact you? Why do they contact you and when do they contact you? So this is another thing to put into your SOP for when you're away from the office. Like, are you getting texts all the time letting you know that Sally didn't show for class? Or are you getting emails asking, Mary had 2 classes left on her class card and she was sick. And is it okay if I extend her class card? Those types of things, right? So it's really setting it up. If you're the type that every day you want a little summary email on what happened that day, create a form, let them fill out that summary so that if you need to know on a daily basis, or if you want to say, okay, here's the category of things that need a phone call to me. Here's the category of things that are a text or a WhatsApp. Here's an email, and here's how often I want to hear and what I want to hear. Go, Kay.
This is such a great point. And I would add too, like your SOPs in general are like, this is part of what they're there for, right? So like all of these SOPs about how do you turn on the heat and who do you call if the roof starts leaking or whatever, are there so that you can be away from your business for an afternoon, a week, a weekend, whatever it is. It's such a good point to have though, like a general SOP for like when we're away. Like we had a list that was called like mom and dad's away list. That was our SOP for like when we took vacation, because that was kind of our feel at our studio. And we did exactly that. One of the things was that the studio assistant had to send us a report via email like every day of just like, here's what went on today. And then what was the other thing? Oh, and I was going to plug, we have a webinar actually in the courses about SOPs are sexy. And this is why SOPs are sexy, because they allow you to have freedom to go on vacation, to have dinner with your family, to be sick whenever you need to, stuff like that. So really relevant topic here, as well as we're planning the summit, because you might want to be away for that, right? And we'll talk about that in a moment. But Terry, pipe in.
I was going to say also, SOPs come in handy, like we talk about taking vacation, but there are those emergencies where I had to get on a because my mother was dying. And I was away from my studio in January, February for 3 full weeks. And I didn't get anything. I just said, it was just, the studio ran. I was in such a state that it didn't matter to me truthfully what happened. It's just, it was a very hard time in my life. And at the same time, I came back and everything was fine. Everything was fine. Were there a few hiccups? Yes, there were a few hiccups. Of course, there were a few hiccups, but there's hiccups when you're there. So, and having those SOPs really made it that I was like, I didn't have to think about it at a very, difficult time in my life. So, and I just was remembering a hashtag Terry's dad. We haven't had hashtag Terry dad in a while. My father always said, when you leave at the end of the day, leave as if you're not coming back the next day. And if you're done your job right, anybody can pick up and know what to do next. And that was absolutely relevant when my mom died. So it really is worth the time, the effort, and the trouble to sit down and write those little silly, what we think are silly things, but are the things that need to be done. You got to get it out of your brain and on a piece of paper. So they are incredibly impactful. Vicky.
Those are all great points. I just wanted to add one thing. It's one thing to have the SOPs and the instructions and the routines and all of that. Even when you have that, there's always a little bit of temptation to still kind of get involved. And that's an important piece of the puzzle, to not fall for that temptation, to get out of your own way there and to actually just let people do things that you know that you could do better. You still have to let other people do them and let go in that way. This is something that I've had to train myself a lot on, now living in a different country from my studio. And it's taken a little while, but now it works. And people are taking care of all kinds of things that I would have always been in charge of. I mean, it's taken 7 years, but it's really like that little bit of do not get involved in it, hand it to someone else. If there's a problem, be like, okay, I'm suggesting that this problem can be solved by that person who is not me. Teresa.
I was going to say something similar to what Vicky just said, but then add a little bit too. Because if you have all these SOPs in place and you go on vacation, but then you're still like in checking the email and in the scheduling software and stuff like that, then that's not going to work. You have to trust that things are going to be taken care of. And if something's actually on fire, they'll call you. The other piece to this though, too, is that especially if you have staff that tends to reach out to you for every little tiny little thing, it's sometimes difficult, even if you have SOPs in place, to just go away and expect them not to contact you all of a sudden for 2 weeks. And so you can kind of start small too. I'm going to go on a 3-day weekend. Don't text me. Don't call me. I'm not going to look at emails. I need you to take care of it. And then, slowly build up their confidence, empower them to make decisions while you're not around. And then you can build up to, longer periods of time. Of course, it's a family emergency. You may not have time to do that training, but it's important to make sure that they can do those things before you need them to do those things. So kind of train them on that stuff. Josh?
Yeah, that's a good point. You're making me think of a story where Jenna and I, for one of our anniversaries, left the studio with the team for just a couple of nights. We just went like to the next town over to a hotel or something, some fancy place. And I got a phone call the first day in, and they're like, the vacuum broke. And I was like, okay, so like, I don't fix vacuums. What do you want me to do about it? And they're like, well, I just thought you should know. And it's like, well, what do you think we should do? So to double down on both of what you and Vicky were saying too, sometimes the best way to empower your team is to have those baby steps, but then it's to not even give them the answer, to be like, well, what do you think we should do about the broken vacuum? well, I could take it to the vacuum repair shop that's around the corner. I was like, that sounds like a great idea. They're like, and I have the credit card on file for this. I'm like, let's do that. So, but then like the next time it happens, theoretically, they go through that process prior to the contact point of you as well. The one thing I was going to add to all of this is, and Vicky was alluding to this, I think, you know, the standard operating procedures being written down doesn't mean that they happen. But it's the way that you externalize the process so that it's not just in your brain, or conversely, just in the brain of someone else on your team. If Kay does something a certain way and I'm away, and then she also gets sick at the same time, and it's not written, like no one else can pick it up. So it's just externalizing it so that you're not totally attached to the performance of any one individual human. And people need to understand how to use it. Like their ability to do it needs to be there, and they need to know where to go to find it. One thing that we encounter is a lot of studios that even they have like a studio handbook, it's a binder, they've got all these SOPs, but we'll go into the studio for an on-ground and be like, hey, where do you use a checklist on your front desk shift? Or like, what's your SOP for cleaning the bathroom or whatever? And they're like, no, we don't have that. Or like, I don't know. Like they don't know of the existence of this thing. They don't use it. There's no practical application of it. So sometimes the effort of creating the SOP and then not seeing a result, it's because we don't bridge the gap between, hey, you guys, we have this SOP and here's the checklist associated with it, and this is when I want you to use it. So you actually need like an SOP for how to use your SOPs. Terry just commented, I know you guys can't see it, or they threw it away. We had someone say to us, well, I had a checklist, but now I know it's on it, so I threw the checklist away. And we're like, what? Anyways, we fixed that, but go ahead, Kay.
What you were saying about like the phone call about the vacuum and stuff just brought up for me. This is a question I saw in the YC recently about like motivating your team, right? And one of the things that is like super essential in having a highly motivated team is that they feel a sense of autonomy in their work. And so actually you're killing two birds with one stone there, right? Like one, you're freeing yourself up because you don't always have to be the person who gets called or who makes the decision about every little thing, what to do. Let your team do that. And then also they start to feel a sense of autonomy more in their work when they're allowed to solve the problem. Right. So as much as you can offer them that opportunity, because not only that's going to give you more freedom, but it's also going to motivate your team. I think that was actually a comment on your video about commissions, Josh, right? And like how that's not actually how you motivate your team, but things like this, really simple, right? But not as obvious, maybe letting them solve problems is actually a huge motivator.
And also I was going to say to your point, Kate, and Josh's point is, and to everybody's point, and if you do allow that and they don't do it the way you want, or there's not the outcome you want, you can't come down on them. You can make it a learning opportunity, or maybe they did something that you didn't agree with, it solved the problem. And so that's, I think, part of what Vicky said, letting go of the control. And then also if it isn't the expected outcome, not coming down on them so that they feel like, oh, I can't be autonomous. Because with autonomy comes a little bit of risk. It's, like if you allow them to be autonomous and make those decisions, maybe the decision isn't the best. And if that's the case, then you can go back and revisit it and talk about it, but you want to make sure that they feel supported in the decision. And I remember way back in my corporate days, I made a decision with one of my accounts that I literally wrote a $10,000 check to this account. I agreed to cover something that I shouldn't have. However, my boss did have my back on that. Even though he was like, he got a lot of heat for it, he had my back on it. So that made me confident in not only my boss, but his boss, my boss's boss. They both had my back. And they were able to, it ended up being fine. But if they had come way down hard on me, I wouldn't have felt like I could make decisions after that. So, just making sure that if it isn't a great decision or you don't agree with it, that you support them still, I guess is what I'm saying.
Last little thing to note on that, I'll jump right off of what Terry said, is you know, sometimes necessity is the mother of invention, right? Like if you're going to be gone and you've been wanting to get rid of being the one that does the newsletter every week, and you're going to be gone for 3 weeks, you have to prepare to train someone to do the newsletter. So sometimes like you can actually, in preparing these SOPs, and when you're gone and someone else does something, it will give you just that little bit of confidence that, oh, wow, they did do it and they did okay. And let's work through it so that it continue to take things off of your plate that you don't necessarily need to be doing on a daily basis. So you can turn this also into an opportunity to train other people, empower them, like Terry said, and take stuff off of your plate. And the best place to do that is at the
Yoga Business Summit. All right. Actually, I was going to say, perfect segue. I was going to say too that SOPs and all of this training of your team, they falls into this category of like planning, right? It's like organization and planning for your business. And the saying goes, and I can't remember where this maybe originates, but for every 10 minutes that you spend in planning and strategizing, you save 1 hour in implementation. And at first I remember hearing that and thinking, that sounds like some bullshit. I don't think that's true. But my experience now, over the last decade especially, is that it is absolutely 100% true in ways that we don't even anticipate. So there's a tremendous amount of like mental energy, mental calorie burn, mental cost when we think, I want to do this thing in my business, but then I have to think about, why do I want to do it? And what would the outcome be? And then how do I actually do it? And then I write out the details of how would I implement like the tactics that would get me to the strategy to then result to the thing. And then I got to translate it to other people. Just that planning part of it is a heavier energetic lift than I think people give credit for it. And the result, you'll know that this might be happening to you because the result will be when you say to yourself or to a business partner or spouse or something like, it's not a problem with shortage of ideas. It's that we've got to like get this in order or get that in order. And the feeling like there's always so much to do that I can't start this other big project because I have to finish this thing. If that's the kind of narrative that you find yourself in your business, then one of the major solutions is more diligent planning and creating space for that planning. So this is a long-winded way of getting us to, it's why we have the Yoga Business Summit annual visionary retreat. It's in this November. I think there's like 7 spots left, something like that. But the point of this is we've added an extra day. There's a pre-webinar and a pre-coaching call included. There's also a quarterly check-in afterwards and a follow-up coaching call included. So it's not just that. It's like you're going to have a whole sort of like 12 months of support, but specifically around the planning for your business. And this is where we see the vast majority of studios, even like the most advanced, successful places, still struggle to get a really tight plan and then strategy for implementation on the plan in place. And the result is that in real time, getting ahead becomes difficult. So here's the picture that I would paint. Imagine if in the next year, at any moment in time when you're working in your business, what you're working on has the shortest time frame for when it would actually like start to happen is 3 months in front of you. And the reason why this can be so crazy is that then an emergency happens, or you get an opportunity, some friends invite you to go away for the weekend, or you know you have your vacation coming up, you're going to go away for a couple of weeks. You have enough lead time in front of it that it's like not stressful. And then that's how it's not about just getting your time back, but it's like getting your flexibility and your lifestyle back. If you can be like, Teresa's like, hey, there's this really cool thing this weekend, let's go away and go skiing or something like that. You're like, sure, why not? Because the thing I'm working on isn't going to happen for 3 months. So I'll just pick it up again on Monday and keep going. And the cost of those 2 or 3 days of not working on it doesn't matter. Or, oh no, the heater broke in the studio and I have to spend a day organizing that and phoning around or whatever else. Like, no big deal because I don't have the pressure of the other stuff. So what we find with the annual visionary retreat is you're going to leave. And this year, we just got it even more dialed in. And there's an extra day as well. If you came to the previous one, you're going to leave with your 3 to 5 biggest like pillars, dominoes, rocks, whatever you want to call them for the next year. You'll have them identified and know what they are. And then you'll have help from your peer group and from the coaches to come up with, here's exactly how we can go and solve for that. So that by the time you're done, we'll even start the implementation on it and anything that's possible. But by the time you're leaving, you'll be able to have the mental space to go, cool, now I'm just going to work on this. I already know the path, and all of that weight of planning, all of that weight of strategy, all of that is significantly reduced or gone. Yeah, we did public launch it. We are starting to get a lot of traction there, a few spots left, but I wanted to plug it here because I know that it's an investment of time, energy, finance, etc. But the ROI on it on a personal level and then on a business financial level is exponentially higher. And there's the continuity afterwards where you're going to have a team of people there supporting you, because the big thing, one of the big things is that quarterly check-in that will happen after the summit. Every quarter, we're going to jump on and we're going to be like, cool, here's the goals you set. Where are we? What's happened? What hasn't? What are we working on in this quarter? So we can keep course correcting. And the team's here to support you with doing that. Your ability to accomplish anything in your business directly proportional to your ability to stay focused on that thing in your business. There it is. Plus, it's basically a free vacation, going back to what Jennifer said as well. Your business pays for it for you. I mean, if you go on vacation, it's just all expense to you. I mean, you should do that too. But you go to the annual visionary retreat, you basically get a vacation and your business pays it because it's a business summit. We've opened up extra rooms. You can share a room with a spouse or someone else, and there are some shared accommodation options if you wanted to bring a manager or if you yourself just want to have a more economical option. So let us know. Let us know. For more information, go click on the event. It's the very top of the home feed is the event, but you can also comment below this video. All right, let's keep it rolling. Jennifer, I don't know, Yoga Business Summit planning. What do you think? You were there that last year.
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, it was so good. It was really, and I still own my studio. So I was kind of like in it as a coach and in it as seeing like both hats on. And I loved, I know there was a group, and I love how you're adding a little bit at the beginning and a little bit of the end of the summit. There was a group of owners who had been to the summit before, and they planned an extra 2 days where like Saturday, they locked themselves in their Airbnb and they like downloaded and got all their stuff done. And then Sunday they had fun. And I thought that, gosh, that's such a great idea, because we all, now you guys have solved for this, but we all typically go back from learning events, and we're so jazzed, and we have our notebook and all of our cool stuff from whatever we learned, and we're like, oh, I can't wait to do all this stuff. And then you get back and the shit show has started again, and you have no time like to implement all the cool things that you've learned. And one of the things that I loved, I've never been to like a learning event before where you actually did the stuff each day instead of just learning about it and writing ideas down and writing your own to-do list. It was actually like a working situation where I didn't feel like when people left, they necessarily were like, oh my gosh, I have so much to do. It was like, I've done 75% of it. Now I'm going to like chew on the rest. And then the other parts, like I need a little bit of time to decide. So I always like to point out that difference to my clients, because I know that I love going to learning things, but I hate that feeling when I get back. It's like a big guilt feeling. Like I'm super jazzed. I get back and then I put the notebook to the side on my desk, and then it just stares at me at all the things that I learned that I didn't implement. So if that's a fear of yours, like that, it's not that kind of a webinar, of a summit or university or whatever you call,
event. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what we were solving for. I still have a notebook where I have notes from Mind Body University when I was a studio owner circa, I don't know, 2009 or something like that, or 2011 or something, whatever. And it's just funny because I'm like, yeah, in the next 3 months, we're going to do these things. And I didn't do any of the things. It was just all, idea.
Yeah.
So that's the whole
And the
idea.
accountability, I
Let's
love the
do it.
accountability part. That's huge, 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 huge. All right, I'm going to throw it over to Vicky. Vicky had an interesting thing to talk about that I don't think we've talked about in a while. But before I knock it over to her, I have to leave a little bit early. I wanted to just chime in. One of the things that she's going to talk about is, this is specifically for yoga teachers, but I think it's also something to think about as an owner. As a teacher, how do you set yourself up when you go in to interview, or you send a resume in, or you're trying to find jobs at studios? What kinds of things can you do to make yourself stand out, to be successful, to, really set yourself up for success with studio owners? I'm going to put a quick plug in on April 4th. I'm doing a webinar on yoga teacher training programs. And one of the suggestions that I have during the training, this is something that we do in the teacher training that we host at my studio. We actually have a section on the business of yoga. And one of the things that I present on is 10 things as a yoga studio owner that I look for in teachers. So I think that this is such a great topic, and it's both sides. Like I said, like for those of you in the YC who are teachers or managers, things to think about, and owners, things to think about too. So I'm gonna pop it over to Vicky for this one.
Thank you, Jennifer. So yeah, this was a blog post that I read called "How to Land a Teaching Job and Impress Any Studio Owner." And I was a little bit skeptical. I was like, whoa, usually it's like they're not saying the right things. But this one actually had some really good points there, things that I would like to see from people applying for a job at my studio, and I think others too. So there were points like, do your research, researching the values of the studio, like where are they coming from, and what's kind of their voice and energy, like what's their mission, vision, core values, asking your own questions, showing that you can sell. Like, I thought this was kind of unusually good. And take a class first. I don't know how many times I've been contacted by people who live, like, I don't know, a 5-minute walk from the studio, 10-minute drive. And I'm like, well, my studio's been here for 5 years. You've literally, you're a yoga teacher and you've never taken a class here. And now you're contacting me asking for a job. Okay, how interested are you really in my studio? So yeah, anyways, I thought they had some good points. Does anyone else have any things that you think, okay, I wish people would do this when they come and ask me for a job?
Yeah, a couple of thoughts come to mind. And also I will say this, you should do this for anybody who's applying for a job at your yoga studio, like front desk staff. Have they done, anybody that comes, I would say, anybody who's going to work for you, have they done any homework? Do they know who you are? Do they know like what's on your website, things like that? So my thought with regards to teaching is, oh God, I just lost that thought. I did. I just had a senior moment. Oh my God, it's gone. So someone save me. I can't remember
The
what
selling thing, like demonstrating that you can sell and you understand the need for sales. That is so, like, that's still kind of unusual in yoga teachers, and something that I would really like to see. And I've been involved in a couple of teacher trainings where I've kind of done this kind of training for the trainees. I think it should be it should be included in any teacher training, kind of getting them savvy about the need for getting money into the studio to keep the energy flowing. What do you think?
Yeah, I wanted to chime in here because, absolutely, you have to have taken a class at my studio for me to even consider you as a teacher. That is so true. And then something that somebody did for us that actually really got me interested was, she's like, I have a recorded class, not just like a voice recording, because anybody could do that. She had a video of her doing a class. And I could go to it and see exactly where her teaching style was, how her tone was, and it was that really got me interested as a studio owner. And it helped me, like, I mean, anybody else, it's like really hard. I mean, most of our teachers came from in-house, you know, so if you're coming and you're not part of our, you know, student base, like you have to do something to set yourself apart. And that really did it for me.
Yeah, I wish people would do that, send a video. I've
Yeah.
never seen anyone do that. But I think when you're not coming from in-house, you have to really try a bit harder. If they're your own students or coming from your own student base, I think as a owner, you already want to support them and give them a chance. But if somebody's just kind of cold calling you or just cold emailing you, they need to do something that's gonna kind of open your eyes to why you want them.
Yeah, the video's a great idea. Oh, sorry, Terry.
No, I was going to say, Teresa, what did you do? Because I know you did some good things.
Yeah, and I think the video is, especially nowadays, can be utilized a lot more. And in my studio, we just tended to have a lot of beginners. So I did not have a lot of hires from in-house. I will say that I didn't have a lot of instructor turnover too, which was always a nice thing. But when I did have to get new instructors, they were from the outside. And, you know, I would look at their experience and meet them, you know, because their energy, their voice, all of that stuff is so important. But I totally agree with, yeah, I want you to have taken classes at the studio and know what we're about and know what the culture is at the studio. And the video is a great way to get an initial screen. It's like an initial screening process in my mind, because, you know, at home in front of the video camera by themselves, they may be a little bit different than, you know, when they're like on stage for real. So the video is a really great screening process, but then I always made them demo. Whether it was a full class or just a 15-minute section, you know, we would work it out with our schedules and everything. I would be there, they would be teaching me, and then I would always try to get at least a few other people there so that they weren't just teaching the owner of the studio, because that's kind of tough too. So that was always really super important to me. And then I'll agree too with Vicky, they have to have more skills than just being able to teach. And that happens so often where, you know, people don't hire for their personalities and their ability to sell things. And then they hire this instructor and then they can't get them to help out with anything else in the studio, you know, and then you've kind of painted yourself into a corner. So those things are just super important to consider. And, you know, we'll often say, in the YC, and it's true, sometimes newer instructors will have more enthusiasm and they will be more willing to support the studio and things like that. Not saying that you have to hire a new instructor, but that stuff is super important. Are they going to be invested in your studio, or are they going to just, you know, walk in, teach a class and leave and never do anything else in the studio and not interact with the community and things like that? You want them to be part of the studio culture and community too. Vicky?
The topic came up today of like audition classes and whether or not you pay teachers for that and what you pay them and how you do them. I don't know what the most common practice is really. I've heard all kinds of constellations there. For my own studio, I've always believed in paying people right away from the first class. But I know that other studios do kind of audition classes where maybe it's like a community pay as you feel class, or maybe they just don't get paid. I don't know if you guys have any input on that.
Are you talking about like in the beginning? I mean, I don't.
Yeah,
I
like
feel that
first class ever. Like let's say first class ever.
if it really is an audition class, it's, to me, that's no different than like it's part of the interview process. And I mean, this is just how I feel about it, is that, you don't pay somebody to come in and do an interview, right? So it's part of the interview. It's part of the interview process. And I did that. I never had to do it with my BCRM teachers because same thing. They were always in-house, but IHP, Infernal Hot Pilates teachers, I had to do that a couple of times. And it was really interesting too, is they would do the audition class. And then I had some things that they needed to follow up on. And both times they never followed up. I'm like, well, they obviously don't want to teach that much. So I feel, like I said, it's part of the interview process. Now, I do know that there are some studios that will, and I think less now than it used to be, where like with newer teachers or something like that, they have to teach a certain number of free classes or community classes before they put them on the payroll, whether it's IC or employee. Again, personally, I think I agree with you on that, Vicki. If someone's doing a job, they should be paid for it. And even the community classes, if, I know a lot of studios will use community classes like, oh, the pay as you go, but like I personally, the same thing. I don't agree with that. It's like pay them what you're going to pay them. And that's why if you have like a tiered pay structure, you can start a brand new teacher or a newer teacher off at a lower rate. And until you can see that they're hitting these certain marks and goals and things like that. And sometimes they might surprise you, as we all say, it's like oftentimes these newer teachers, they are just so enthusiastic that once they get a few classes under their belt, they take off. So you can always raise them up. But that's where I think having that tiered structure can be handy, is starting off a newer teacher at a lower rate. And the same thing with even experienced teachers. I had this conversation with a client. It's like, just because they have been teaching, elsewhere, and doesn't necessarily mean you have to give them your time. That again, this goes back to that performance-based pay, or having a pay structure, so that you're like, okay, this is where you start, right? And I worked with one of my clients. We did, if they're brand new out the gate, it was one. If they were new, had been teaching, but new to the studio, they would start them at a little bit higher because they had more experience. And then after that, there was the probationary period, and then there was review, and then they would get bumped up as needed. So I don't know, long-winded answer, Nikki, but I think if it's truly a demo class, then it's part of the interview process. And I don't feel that they need to be paid. Anybody else? I mean, post below if you disagree, but I just feel it's part of the interview.
Yeah, I was just going to add to the tiered pay structure there. I was actually talking to a studio that's going to open soon. It's not open yet. And we discussed actually starting everyone off at the lowest tier, even new, sort of more experienced teachers coming in, to start everyone off there, and then sort of saying, okay, we'll evaluate this really soon, like maybe in a month or two, to make sure that they're actually doing all the things that you need them to do to move up a tier, just so that you're very clear on these expectations from the beginning. Because I think that's a mistake that we often do when we first open up, is that we're not clear on the teachers what we expect from them, but we don't realize what we expect from them until later. And then it's like we're taking something away, or we're adding to their burden or something, and then we get pushed back. So the sooner you can do stuff like that, the better.
And that ties in with something that I was going to say. I agree that that's a good plan, to no matter how experienced they are, this is the path that the instructors take. And that, because I wanted to bring up a situation that I've seen several times recently, where you have to be careful sometimes of celebrity instructors that come in and want to teach, right? Because especially if you're a newer studio owner, sometimes if someone comes in and they say, oh, I've been teaching for this many years and I have all these followers, and if you hire me, I'll be able to bring all these clients to your studio, and they have big talk and promise a lot. And sometimes I've seen a lot of situations where people like this will talk the studio owner into like really high per class pay and make all these promises, and then they come in and no one follows them to the studio. And I've even seen cases where their classes didn't do well at all because they just didn't fit into the culture of the studio, and the students didn't like that instructor. So always be really wary of that. And so if you do, as Vicky just suggested, and bring everyone in the same, you can avoid sticky situations like that. And then all of a sudden you can avoid having someone on the payroll all of a sudden that you're paying a crazy fee every time they teach, and they're not bringing in any students. And then again, you've painted yourself into a corner.
Rock stars, you got to be careful of it. Rock stars and bad boys, right? The bad boys.
They talk a good talk, man.
They talk a good talk, but they don't, they're all there. There's not much behind it, for sure.
Right.
I just thought I'd add, I wanted to pipe in based on what Terry was saying about having the audition classes. We did the same thing. I feel the same way, Terry. It's like, it's an audition that's part of your interview process. And for us, it kind of, if we were interested, we would do multiple of these like kind of off the book classes with inviting our staff in to give feedback. And it kind of became like a continuing education until we felt the teacher was ready to actually put on the schedule and start getting paid. So it might take 2, 3, 4 classes sometimes just to like feel like they were ready. But we didn't pay them for those because it was sort of like audition / getting you ready, and it wasn't to our actual students. It was just who could make it from the staff that wanted to, be there and give feedback. But it was really telling, like, I guess you were saying how some IHP teachers didn't even do what they needed to do. It will tell you how interested they are based on how much, how well they respond to your feedback and want to come back. Yeah.
And just to your point, what you just said too, it's not uncommon when you're applying for a job that you have multiple interviews, right? So that's this, and actually having an SOP on your interview process is helpful. It's like, and everybody's following the same. That's the other thing too with pay, is your interview process should be the same. Now it might change over time, but having a standardized interview process helps as well. And the other thing too is interview questions. Like when I was interviewed, I had a list of questions that I asked, and I asked every candidate the same questions. And then I would record their answers. And one of the things I also noted on the form was when they arrived. Like if the interview was at 3:30, when did they arrive to the interview? Right? Did they arrive right at 3:30? Were they late? If they were late, let me tell you, they weren't getting hired. If they couldn't even show on time for an interview, then they weren't getting hired. So that's the other thing too, is having a thoughtful interview process can really go a long way. So you avoid, what is the hire slow, fire fast. So this is the part of the hire slow, and then always having a plan for that, because oftentimes, I'm sure we've all been in this situation where we're like hiring quickly because it's an emergency situation. And I find that typically that's usually not the best way. It oftentimes ends up to having more problems, right? It's so, just if you have a plan, a hiring plan and an interview plan and all of that, and you're perpetually and continually cultivating and looking for teachers or staff or whatever, then you have, like any HR company or big organization will always be interviewing, right? We'll always have job posted. And in fact, I can't remember which client it is, but they always have interested in joining our team, right? Always have on every email, on the website, interested in joining our team. They have a page devoted to, are you interested in joining our team? So that they always have candidates that are maybe looking, and they put their information in. So then when they do go to hire, then they've already got some basic information, right? Like a resume and maybe a bio or whatever information you're looking for, right? So that's a really good thing to do as well, is always have a pool of candidates. If you are in a situation where you need to get someone in, then you have a pool of candidates there. And if you are in a dire situation too, there's nothing wrong with just reaching out to someone and just doing a temporary basis and say, hey, I just need a teacher temporarily. Can you come in? I mean, I've done that for studios. It's like, hey, Terry, can you come teach some classes? I'm stuck or whatever. And I'm like, sure, I'll go teach. It's not a regular studio I teach at. So that's where if you're networking with other studios in the area too, that could be an opportunity if if you really are in a lurch and you need someone to come on board and just fill for a few classes or something like that. Vicki, what's your plan now that you're in a different country for some of that stuff?
Well, I've been in a situation for quite a while now where I have quite a good pool of teachers who are all like wanting more.
That's always a good
thing. Else to express it, but it's like there's several of them that would like more classes than I can give them. So when someone goes away, it's never well, touch wood, but it's not been a problem so far. Even when two of the full-time teachers, for some reason, decided to go on vacation at the same time, I was still able to fill it with the teachers that I already have. So yeah, that's kind of the plan that I have to. The plan that I have is I have now got a really big calendar on the wall where I have written down for the whole year. They write up their vacation time ahead of time. So that they can see when they're planning their vacation, and please don't plan it at the same time because that was a little bit sticky, but it worked. But yeah,
I didn't do the board like that, so that's a really good, because I didn't really have space in my studio for that. But I would say, was getting close. I would say, okay, let me know when you're planning to be away, and then if there was a conflict, then I could manage to that. So
I think it's actually it's a tough one because. Especially if they are independent contractors and not employees, like I'm always a little bit like, how long ahead can I demand? I can't really demand anything of them because they are independent contractors. I can ask them nicely, and they do it. But I would really like to know for the next year, when are they going to be away? They might not be giving that to me, but yeah, ideally is to plan. I mean, that's what they do in normal, like corporate jobs, isn't it? They have to submit their holiday for the year. They have to do it in like October or November for the whole year ahead. That's pretty normal. But then, in the yoga studio world, then teachers will be like, oh, next month I'm going traveling for 3 weeks. I think just trying to create a culture where that's not done. So that's what I've tried to do at my own studio by having this big calendar where I'm showing them that, okay, I've written here in like pink marker for this person and yellow for that, so that you can see it really clearly that these people have written out that they want to take vacation. So try to plan it so that you don't do it at the same time.
I think you can, even with independent contractors, if you have it in your expectations of what the policy is if you are going to be away, right? Because if they're contracted to teach classes, then you need to cover those classes if they're not going to be there. So I think you could have something written in your contract with your employees as well, but also with your ICs. It's like, this is the policy about taking time, how much notice is needed, what you have to do. Are you required to get the classes? I know some studios, the teacher's required to, is responsible for finding the stub, and other studios, they want somebody else to find the subs. They have to put the sub request in. So whatever your policy is, if you have it clearly laid out in your agreement, then I do believe, again, I'm not a lawyer, but I do believe that then that's part of the expectation when they become a contractor with you. Here are the expectations.
Yeah, I think it's not going to be legally binding, but then there's a lot of agreements that you can make with people and kind of show to them, or even have them sign that this is just an agreement between us, where I state what I would like and you agree to it. I'm not going to take you to court, but at least we can have like kind of a gentleman's agreement between us.
Yeah. I mean, it's just laying out the expectations. And like you said, you're not going to take them to court. And if there's a problem, it's like, hey, remember you agreed to this. And if this happens a lot, then maybe they're not a good fit for your culture. Maybe they're not a good fit for your studio if they're always pushing the bounds and always kind of goes back to a lot of conversation there was in the back a little while ago in the YC is like, what's a realistic expectation for sub requests? Like, I think most studios, you have some people who never request subs, but occasionally, and then you have teachers that request subs all the time. And what's the policy about sub requests? And this you can even say for independent contractors as well. It's like, this is the policy for sub requests. And if you break this policy, then the outcome is you're not on the schedule anymore. So that it all goes down to that too. That's where having SOPs and policies and things like that written out really helps the business and makes your life less stressful.
For sure.
Wow, for sure. We covered a lot today.
We did.
Yeah, any final thoughts, beautiful humans, before we wrap up?
Come to the summit. Get yourself signed up. Nab those spots.
Absolutely.
Like, really don't miss it. I would highly recommend you to not miss it.
Totally. It was great fun. And Vicki, I'm throwing it out there, even if Vicki is going to do an ecstatic dance session class. It was the most fun. If you've never done ecstatic dance, it is so amazing. So we definitely are going to have
Josh was saying we need to do it on the beach next time.
Oh, that would be awesome.
See if we manage to get the speakers on the beach, but that would be so amazing, dancing in the sand.
Dancing, oh yeah. I'm sure we could get speakers down to the beach. We just have to bring some Bluetooth speakers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's going to be epic.
Epic. All right. Well, nab a spot for the summit before it sells out. And if you're not a premium member, consider, if you need help with any of the things we've talked about, rolling out, writing up some SOPs, anything like that, you can book a call with any of the coaches. We all have our link posted in our little About Us section. Feel free to reach out with any questions, comments, post below. What's your policy on sub requests? What's your policy on taking time off? How do you handle interviews? Post below. Let's get some conversation going. Thanks, crew.
Thank you. Have a good weekend.
Have a good weekend. And final thought,
Yoga.
St. Patrick actually was not born in Ireland. He was born in Roman Britain and went over and did all these conversions in Ireland. That's why he's the patron. Not because I just read that this morning. So happy St. Patrick's Day, everybody. Bye. Bye.